appeared on NBC's Meet the Press after being booed at Friday's GOP Lincoln dinner in Iowa when he said former President Trump is running for office to stay out of prison. Hurd said a lot of people clapped when he made the comment. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Starting with the Sigler in Cerritos, got the big rig crash that shut down the Ram 91 eastbound toward the 65 northbound. You're going to slow down on Lakewood Boulevard. Also got the Sigler in Anaheim on the 91 westbound at East Street. Still big in a fuel spill, have the right lane blocked off. That's a slow drive from Cramerville South. And watch for an injury crash reported in Santa Ana on the 5 South near First Street. Looks like the carpool lane is blocked off, so stay towards the right. Also checking on a crash at Elysian Park, middle lane block 110 northbound before the 5 freeway.
When your ride fires on all cylinders, so do you. That's why Napa is on a mission to keep you in motion. With nearly 6,000 Napa Auto Parts stores and over 17,000 Napa Auto Care centers, the Napa Network has everything you need to get up and go.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
As the NFL heads into its second week of training camp, the league's diversity numbers have made slight improvement. There are still only 3 black head coaches among the NFL's 32 teams, but the league has reached a milestone with 5 black team presidents and 6 black general managers. Both numbers are season highs for the NFL. Baltimore, Las Vegas, Denver, Chicago, and Washington will enter the 2023 season with a black team president. In Las Vegas, Sandra Douglas Morgan is the first black woman to run a team. Teams with a black general manager include Cleveland, Tennessee, Atlanta, Detroit, and Washington. The Dodgers were shut out yesterday by the Cincinnati Reds. The Dodgers are 2-5 in their last 7 games. The Dodgers begin a 3-game series tonight at home against Oakland. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
2 years ago, on Juneteenth 2021, KBLA Talk 1580 launched with a promise to give disenfranchised fellow citizens a voice in current political, economic, social, and cultural issues with an empowering, sustainable, and restorative language.
Everybody's got a little light under the sun, under the sun, under the sun, under the sun.
As we enter our 3rd year, we are delighted that KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerges as the talk station of choice for African American listeners. In a vigorous public opinion research study, the 2023 African American Media Issue Survey finds that for the 2nd consecutive year, KBLA Talk 1580 remains the most trusted, credible, and reliable media source in Southern California for African Americans and beyond. Furthermore, 80% of those surveyed agree that outlets like KBLA Talk 1580 provide honest and authentic content about the issues most important to the black community directly from black journalists who understand the issues that need to be addressed. At KBLA Talk 1580, we remain committed to curating conversations that matter to you. Thank you for your continued support. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. The station that sounds like the city looks. The city looks.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Glad to have you with us today. Today, in case you just tuned in, we're in hour 2 now. Today is the first day of national syndication for this program, and I want to thank and welcome WBOK 1230 AM in New Orleans as the first affiliate to broadcast Tavis Smiley across the nation. Other stations coming online later this week. More stations onboarding after Labor Day. But today is a bit of history around here. Today is our first day of national syndication. And again, the first station to broadcast this program is WBOK 1230 AM in New Orleans, and we are glad about it. In this hour, filthy rich politicians, the swamp creatures, latte liberals, and ruling class elites cashing in on America. We'll talk in this hour with Matt Lewis of the Daily Beast about his provocative new book. You got to love that title, right? Filthy Rich Politicians, the Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elite Cashing In on America. I love a good book title. We'll talk to Matt in this hour about the new book, which is essentially, as you can probably tell by the title, a takedown of the political elite running amok in Washington. I'm pleased to be joined by Matt Lewis. Matt, how are you today, sir?
Hey, Tavis, I'm doing great.
Good to have you on the program. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the book. I'm glad we got an hour to unpack it. There's a lot in here that I want to jump into. Let me start with that title. As I said a moment ago, you heard me sort of chuckling. I've written a few books in my career, and there's nothing that succeeds like a great book title. Filthy Rich Politicians, the Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. You got to come out of your shell, Matt. Stop being so shy about what you're trying to say.
Well, thank you. I agree. It's a great title. And to be honest, I had nothing to do with it other than greenlighting it. But I recognize a good title when I see it. So someone else had the idea, and I was more than happy to go with it.
Yeah. Is that really true? Is that the state of our democracy when it comes to a conversation about our elected leaders, that they are essentially filthy rich politicians?
It really is. So right now, the average member of Congress is about 12 times richer than the average American household. And the average member of Congress is now a millionaire. And, look, I realize being a millionaire ain't what it used to be, especially if you live in a big city. It may not feel like you're that wealthy if you're a millionaire, but, only about 5 to 7% of Americans are millionaires, and yet more than 50% of Congress are. So there is a big gap between the people who represent us, and this gap has been widening dramatically in the last 3 or 4 decades. And so I do think that at some level it does speak to a disconnect between we the people and our politicians.
We'll get to the widening as we widen out this hour, pardon the pun. But let me start with the first point you've made, which is that the average member of Congress is 12 times richer than everyday fellow citizens. I'm not naive in asking this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why?
Well, as you can imagine, there are a whole bunch of reasons. Just for one thing, rich people are more likely to run for office. And part of it, believe it or not, is they have more time on their hands. It's not just the money. It's they have enough money that they can afford to take a year and campaign door to door. Also, I think more and more political parties and, party bosses are really, when they're vetting candidates, when they're recruiting candidates, they're looking for people who can self-fund. So they're already just looking for people who are already filthy rich before they get in office. And then, of course, once people get in office, they tend to get richer for a variety of reasons. And some of that, I think, is, it's just typical. The rich get richer often, if nothing else, just based off of interest. But, also there are instances of that certainly look like insider trading that I talk about in the book as well.
Yeah, we'll get to that point about how and why they seem to get richer while they're in office. Let me ask you right quick before I move forward, though. And I'm again, this is fascinating for me. Why it is that rich people want to be in public office in the first place? You've got money, you've got power. Whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Mehmet Oz, who ran in Pennsylvania, whether it's Rick Caruso, who ran for mayor here in Los Angeles, where this studio is. I mean, there are Bloomberg in New York. I could do this all day long, right? Why is it, in your research, what have you discovered about why rich people want to be in office in the first place, in public office? And they make precious little money as compared to what they have in their bank accounts already anyway. So why run? Why run?
Well, that is an interesting point, and sometimes I admire them for running. I mean, if I were filthy rich, I think I would probably be on a beach drinking a pina colada right now instead of, wearing a suit, in Congress or something. So in a sense, I think there's some nobility to it, and I actually don't buy the argument that they're there to, change the tax laws to benefit their business. And these are people who are very rich. they could buy lobbyists if they want. There are better ways to affect public policy. But I also think in some cases, even though their goals may be noble, I think they may be sometimes misguided. So one theory is the transitive property of expertise, right? You think that because you were a successful businessman, that is somehow transferable to legislating. And I think there's a lot of that. People who were very wildly successful in business, they think that means that they know that they're smart, and it's not always applicable. It doesn't always translate.
It does not. Let's put a pin in that for a second. I know there's other things on that list. We'll get to those in just a second here. But put a pin in it for a moment. I want to come to this notion of this transitive notion of expertise. That didn't work out so well for us with Donald Trump. We were told that because he was successful in business, he could run a country. Not so much. We'll talk about that and a great deal more. Matt Lewis is our guest in this hour of Tavis Smiley. His new book is called Filthy Rich Politicians, The Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America.
This is getting good.
Yeah, man.
Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
I'm James Alexander, a proud member of AARP. 1967, I was 17. That spring, my friends, the Barcades, and I made Soulfinger. It was a hit. Number 3 on the charts. That summer, we became the great Otis Redding's band. First gig, the famed Apollo. That fall, we toured. That winter found me in a morgue identifying the bodies of my bandmates and Otis Redding. My music and their memories bring me joy. The Barcades forever.
What would you call a joy that is as solemn as it is sweet and knows no bounds? A joy that's beautifully rooted in soul and resilience. This is Black joy, a joy that reflects pride and honor despite every challenge. AARP believes the power of Black joy is limitless, and we celebrate this joy supreme. Join us in celebrating Black joy at aarp.org/blackcommunity.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the oven on, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time-to-talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
To my hometown, my community. Some of you have known me my whole life. Do you notice anything different about the kids in the neighborhood? Ever paid attention? You might start with gifts, money, attention. These are signs. Child trafficking is happening right here in this town. So don't just watch through the window. Pay attention. Because the more we know, the more we'll all know to say no. Learn the signs to look for and how to help at no-to-say-no.com.
In our community, mental health struggles can sometimes go unnoticed. The suicide rate among Black youth has risen faster than any other ethnic group. Only 1 in 3 African Americans who need mental health care receives it. African American women are only half as likely as their Caucasian counterparts to seek professional mental health services. Even those who guide us spiritually can sometimes face their own challenges. 45% of pastors say they've experienced depression or burnout to the extent they need to take a leave of absence from ministry. As people of faith, it's time to acknowledge it's okay not to be okay. You can pray and get help. Visit normalizehelp.org for more information and resources. Join us in raising mental health awareness in our community. Funded by the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health and the Champion Counseling Center of Faithful Central Bible Church.
Who do you trust to get at the truth?
Tavis Smiley.
That's who. The conversation continues right now.
It does indeed. Our guest is Matt Lewis, author of the new book, Filthy Rich Politicians, The Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. Matt, one could read that title and assume that you're only talking about the left. I've seen the text, so I know better than that. It's both sides of the aisle, is it not?
Absolutely. I really could find no difference from Republicans or Democrats in this book. Everyone is equally guilty. So there are 10 chapters, and 8 of them, look at basically how the rich get elected and the elected get rich. Then I have one chapter called Latte Liberals that it's sort of what you think, right? It's people who cast themselves as being kind of men and women of the people, but there's some hypocrisy at play. But I also have a companion chapter called Ivy League Populists, and it kind of looks at the Republican version of that, right? So it's the people like Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, J.D. Vance, Ron DeSantis. These are typically guys who are Ivy Leaguers. They're elites by all, by every sense of the word, they're elites, and yet they cast themselves as populists and sort of everyman. And so those 2 chapters, looking kind of at the left and the right, are really more about hypocrisy than about being filthy rich per se.
Before we took that break, I was asking you why rich people choose to run for office. They have all the resources. They have certainly they can run for office, and many of them do. But they've got resources. They've got connections. They've got power. They make precious little money, comparatively speaking, running for public office. So why do so many rich people decide in this country to run for office? One of the reasons at the top of your list was this notion that they can transfer their expertise from the private sector to the public sector. That doesn't always work out so well, Donald Trump being the most recent example of how that did not serve us well. But that was the first thing on your list. Unpack that for me, and then there were a couple other things I think you wanted to say about why they run for office in the first place.
Right, yeah. So the first one's the transitive property of expertise. They think that because they were successful in business, that they have it all figured out and that it's transferable. And it generally is not. I've seen, high-ranking military people try to go into politics. I've seen very successful business people. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail, but usually it's just not the same. It's not magic. The next one on my list is actually boredom. It's the same reason why rich people want, rich people want to buy rocket rides and baseball teams.
Yeah.
And it's to have a hobby, to give, and this is associated with the I want to give back to the community. That's a close relative of this one is the want to give back. But I think some of it is all, related to this has to do with wanting attention and fame. There's the economy, and now there's the attention economy. And so, but I think boredom, I guess, is at the bottom of that.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier in this conversation that on both the left and the right, Democrats and Republicans, when they're recruiting people these days to run for office, they're looking for people who can self-fund their campaigns. It's one of the reasons why Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz ran in Pennsylvania. There are others I could point to who are already wealthy, and they get recruited to sort of run for office. And yet it seems to me that the self-funding of these campaigns does something to our democracy. I don't want to unpack the something. You wrote the book. That's why I have you on as a guest. But there's something about that that's troubling for me, that we're seeing more and more millionaires and billionaires running for office, self-funding their campaigns. That can't, to my mind, be good for democracy. Your take?
I think it is problematic, right? And in the case of Pennsylvania, Mehmet Oz, the guy he beat in the Republican primary, was also worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And in Illinois right now, the richest politician in America is J.B. Pritzker. He's the governor of Illinois. He had to beat 2 other billionaires. There were 3 billionaires running for governor. So it's not just being a millionaire. Just to get in the game, you have to be filthy rich. And I think that is the problem, right? There've always been politicians who were rich. And we can go back to George Washington, who was really rich, and Franklin Roosevelt. But a lot of times in the olden days, it was, with a president maybe, and the U.S. Senate, the upper chamber. I think what has changed now is the sense that there are 435 members of the House of Representatives, the lower chamber. And, 3 or 4 decades ago, there were plumbers in Congress. There were pipe fitters representing us in Congress. Now that's kind of gone. And I think the sense is that just to make it to Congress, I mean, even someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is, she's this kind of populist, kind of, where's her status as like a rural, she would call herself probably unsophisticated, anti-elite. She's worth at least $5 million, So like just to be a populist, the fire-breathing, rabble rouser, you still have to be a millionaire. And I think part of the problem is that everyone has a worldview. Everyone has, our experience, whatever your experience has been, to some degree that will inform your worldview and your politics. There's nothing wrong with that. It's true of all of us. But if everybody in Congress is a millionaire, they're going to be bringing that with them. That's going to inform how they see the world, and I think ultimately it's going to decide our policies.
How are these populists? I'm talking now specifically about Republicans. You ran a list of them a moment ago: Ron DeSantis, Josh Hawley, Marjorie Taylor Greene, others. How are these GOP populists getting away with advancing that message? And I asked that against the backdrop that a billionaire named Donald Trump got away with it. You're broke and you're poor and I'm a billionaire, but I'm the guy that can save you. I'm the guy that can help you because I understand what you're going through, because I feel your pain. How are these rich Republicans advancing this populist notion? How are they getting away with that narrative?
I thought Dave Chappelle on Saturday Night Live really had this great analysis of Donald Trump, who basically Chappelle called him a, quote, honest liar. Mm-hmm. And it was
I remember that. Yeah.
It was partly based on Trump, telling Americans, like, yes, I don't pay taxes because I'm smart, and and I know how the game's rigged because I've been rigging it myself. It was stunning what Trump has done, and the rest of them aren't as good at it. I mean, Trump is in a master class of being able to do this. But fundamentally what I think has happened is a couple things. One, elite, simply the definition of elite, it doesn't mean what it used to mean, right? It doesn't mean rich people who went to an Ivy League school. It now means people we don't like, And so Ted Cruz is not an elite, but AOC is, even though she was a bartender. And the voters, the Republican voters, and I'm talking to you from West Virginia right now. They've gone along with that. So I definitely think that's part of it. The other part of the story is that even though right now, and I don't want to get ahead of us, but right now, for example, something like 88% of Republicans and 87% of Democrats want to ban congressional stock trading. Mm-hmm. Even though the public generally believes the game is rigged, nobody is willing to vote against a politician for it. Like I don't know of a single politician who has been defeated because they seemed too rich, or because they because it seemed like they were engaging in insider trading. And so even though I think most people have a sense that the fix is in, it doesn't drive their decisions when it comes to the ballot box.
Yeah. In case you've just tuned in, Matt Lewis made the point earlier that our elected officials in Washington are about 12 times richer than the everyday people who sent them there in the first place. And then once they get there, they enrich themselves. They go there rich, and they get richer while they are serving. It's clear to me, Matt, from your book, that these politicians are clearly taking advantage of the system, and they're hoping that we're not savvy enough to notice. But what are the ways in which they are gaming the system once they get there? I'm driving to how it is when they get there, they legitimately and legally end up getting richer. Again, insider trading is one way to do that, but that's illegal. So I'm asking, how do they legitimately end up getting richer while they're in Congress?
Well, I do think the number one example is actually insider trading.
Wow.
And you're right; it's been illegal since 2012 for members. And before 2012, members of Congress could engage legally in it. Now, and I can give you. We don't have to go into it now, but at some point, there are examples in my book that they're not dispositive. I can't prove that members were engaging, but I can give you examples of Republicans and Democrats who had these very suspiciously timed trades that if I described it, most people would conclude that something fishy was up. But there's other stuff too. I mean, I'll just give you one example.
Sure.
And again, this is not scandalous. This is not criminal. It's what I call the banality of political corruption. But it's simply the fact that people who make money from investments are taxed generally at a lower rate than people who make money from a salary. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that most members of Congress make most of their money from investments. Therefore, they are paying a lower tax rate than most of us who actually have a job and draw a salary. That's just one example. Another one that's kind of, I don't think it's very sexy. People don't seem outraged by this, but it's actually book deals. Just within the past month, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, was worth $300,000. According to disclosure reports, his net worth was about $300,000. He is now a millionaire based on a book deal that he got based on him being a famous politician. And this is pretty ubiquitous.
Yeah. To your point about the ubiquitous nature of it, I was just reading over the weekend, as I'm sure you were. And let me just back up and qualify this by saying I love Ketanji Brown Jackson. I love KBJ. She made history. I'm glad she's there. Her dissents in her first term were amazing to read. Brilliant is she. And I'm delighted that she's on that court. And yet I couldn't help but raise one of my eyebrows this weekend, Matt, when I read that she just closed a $3 million book deal. Now, let me be clear.
Yeah.
She's not the first person on the Supreme Court to do this, and she won't be the last unless they change the rules, which they won't, because that's how they make money. But I was stunned, and I guess I shouldn't have been, because, again, she's not the only person I know to have done this, so I'm not trying to single her out, and I love her. I love her the way she sees the world and the way she's going to serve on this court and to rule in the coming years, many years to come. But there's something kind of funky about that when a Supreme Court justice gets seated and months later they're signing a $3 million book deal. Matt, that's don't hate the player, hate the game.
That's it. I'm totally with you, and she's not alone. But yeah, it feeds the sense that and look, I mean, this ties into Clarence Thomas and his vacations.
Sure.
And I think Justice Sotomayor, there was an allegation that she had someone on her staff pressuring books, someone to buy her books or something like that. Everyone is kind of doing this, which speaks to the ubiquity of it. When it comes to the book sales, the most, I think, disturbing part are these bulk orders. And so, right now, I've written a book and I'm trying to, good luck trying to sell a book that takes on both sides of the aisle. So I'm trying to, I'm hawking my book and I know what it's like. But some of these members of Congress, first of all, they don't all write good books. I mean, some of the books, like President Obama's, memoir, of course, is very good, and some of them are good. But most of these books are really not that great. But what happens is, they'll get like a committee, like say the National Republican Congressional Committee, to buy
bulk
like
orders,
50,000 copies. Mm-hmm. And so that will boost their ratings in like the New York Times Book Review or bestseller list, but it will also result in the book making more money. That could be more royalties, bigger book advances. Yeah. So some of that money is effectively being laundered into their personal pockets.
It is indeed. More to talk about when we come forward with Matt Lewis. The book is called Filthy Rich Politicians, The Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. You are listening right now to Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I learned about atrial fibrillation the hard way. My symptoms would come and go, shortness of breath, fatigue. I kept going. Then I got so lightheaded, I couldn't. My doctor said I have AFib, so I'm about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. Other symptoms, irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain can come and go, but the risk of stroke stays. If you have symptoms, tell a doctor. Visit notimetowait.com.
Sponsored by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
Parents, we know we can't protect our kids from everything. Eventually, they're going to bump their heads or scrape their knees. But we can protect them from 6 types of cancer. HPV, or human papillomavirus, is a common, preventable virus that can cause cancer later in life. The HPV vaccine prevents human papillomavirus and all the cancers it can cause. The American Cancer Society recommends getting your sons and daughters the HPV vaccine starting at age 9 to protect them later in life.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Donald Trump says Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell should step down from his role after freezing up at a news conference. The former president told Breitbart News the incident involving McConnell was sad and went on to criticize the minority leader's handling of the Senate GOP. When asked whether Trump wants to see new leadership, he said, "We have to have that." There are concerns over McConnell's health after the 81-year-old froze mid-sentence while talking to reporters last week. In Washington, D.C., the National Museum of African American History and Culture will host the annual hip-hop block party on August 12th. The event celebrates the 50th birthday of the genre and highlights its innovation and progression. 11 artists, DJs, and performers will take to the stage. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Still seeing that SIG alert in Cerritos. This is a big rig involved in a wreck on the 91 East 91 to the 605 North transition off limits. That has slowed the drive from Cherry. Also Cerritos, 91 West at Bloomfield, a wreck blocking the right lane. Long Beach, long delays on the 91 West at Atlantic, left lane with a crash, and now the busy drive from East Bellflower Boulevard. Still seeing a stalled vehicle in Sherman Oaks on the south side of that 405, just past Burbank Boulevard. That's stuck in a center traffic lane. That busy drive as far back as Victory.
When your ride fires on all cylinders, so do you. That's why Napa is on a mission to keep you in motion. With nearly 6,000 Napa Auto Parts stores and over 17,000 Napa Auto Care centers, the Napa Network has everything you need to get up and go.
Looking for your next job? Express can help. Express Employment Professionals has put more than 10 million people to work in the last 40 years in all types of industries. With competitive pay and no fee to help you find a job, what are you waiting for? Visit expresspros.com today.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
As the NFL heads into its second week of training camp, the league's diversity numbers have made slight improvement. There are still only 3 black head coaches among the NFL's 32 teams, but the league has reached a milestone with 5 black team presidents and 6 black general managers. Both numbers are season highs for the NFL. Baltimore, Las Vegas, Denver, Chicago, and Washington will enter the 2023 season with a black team president. In Las Vegas, Sandra Douglas Morgan is the first black woman to run a team. Teams with a black general manager include Cleveland, Tennessee, Atlanta, Detroit, and Washington. The Dodgers were shut out yesterday by the Cincinnati Reds. The Dodgers are 2-5 in their last 7 games. The Dodgers begin a 3-game series tonight at home against Oakland. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
Girl, I have a secret. When I get stressed out, I get sweaty. That's why I use Secret Clinical Antiperspirant. It's like my own secret weapon. For 72 hours, I get Secret's strongest protection against sweat caused by stress, heat, and activity, because you know how crazy life can get. Plus, it's made with advanced odor fighters that don't just cover up smelliness. They help prevent it from happening in the first place. Believe me, if I weren't wearing Secret, I'd be a hot, smelly mess. Thankfully, Secret works.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
Our guest in this hour is Matt Lewis, author of the new book, Filthy Rich Politicians, The Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. Matt, I was thinking during that break about the point you made moments ago. You were somewhat joking, but I take the point that here you are trying to sell a book that's taking on both sides, taking on the left and the right. They're all filthy rich politicians. They're all swamp creatures, et cetera, and they're all gaming the system and hoping that we don't pay attention or take notice. I thought about that comment that you made, and I hate to break this news to you, but it seems to me that the American people don't so much care about the ludicrous money in our politics. And I say that, and more broadly, seem not to care too much about corruption writ large. And I say that in part because of the poll numbers we were discussing earlier on today's program. You saw these numbers today in the New York Times, the new poll out that Trump is crushing DeSantis and all the other GOP rivals. He's 37 points ahead of his closest challenger. That's Ron DeSantis. And we're like, 3 indictments in, more coming. Fannie Willis in Georgia said over the weekend that she's ready to go. And so these indictments keep coming. And yet, with every indictment, it seems Donald Trump continues to gain ground in his lead over his Republican challengers. And it's pretty difficult to call him anything at this point except the presumptive Republican nominee. And this is all kind of corruption. This is not just money in our politics. So if they don't care, they, being many of our fellow citizens, seem to care not at all about this level of corruption, then why do you think, as you embark on this book tour, taking on both sides, that they care about money in politics?
Well, it is interesting. They care, but here's how they care.
Okay.
When I go promote this on conservative shows, typically I talk about, and by the way, I'm being completely honest. Sure. All of this is in my book. But when I go on a conservative show, I'll tend to talk about Hunter Biden and Nancy Pelosi stock trading. Mm-hmm. And then oftentimes if I go, on a more progressive show, I'll talk more about Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And I think that is indicative of the audience. I think that Republicans really do think there's a lot of corruption out there, and Hunter Biden is responsible for it all, Mm-hmm. And there's a Democratic version of it. And so I guess the thing is, I think that voters do care about the money and the corruption, and I do think that so many of them, it's almost baked into the cake. They're not shocked by it anymore. They're somewhat apathetic. They believe the game is rigged. And it's important, but it doesn't compare to the culture war. And they're willing to look the other way on their side, on their team. And their team may be doing some questionable things, but it's nothing compared to those other people. And so I think this is an important issue that I do think is eroding trust in liberal democracy and our institutions and in our lawmakers. But I will agree, I do not think it is driving political decisions in terms of how anybody votes.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking as you're talking, which of these I should be more troubled by. the fact that both sides believe that there's a problem with corruption. Both sides believe there's a problem with money in our politics, or that both sides see the other side being responsible for that. So is it the money, or is it the frame of how we discuss the money? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, and I'll be honest with you, Tavis, I mean, just to kind of lay my cards on the table after having written this book. So, I intentionally did not put a lot of Joe Biden or Donald Trump in this book, partly because there's a lot of books that have been written about Donald Trump, and there are going to be a lot of books probably written about the Biden era. And I wanted to focus on kind of the low-grade, rank-and-file, the banality of corruption, as I say, how your average member of Congress is making money off the stock market, off of, paying family members for this job and that job. But I do talk a little bit about Biden and Trump. And in the main part is in the context of their families, how both sides have families who have also cashed in. And I'll say this, with the Hunter Biden controversy, if he's guilty of all the things that he's been accused of, and if it turns out that, that the Biden family's been taking foreign money and all this stuff, it's very serious and it's troubling, and it might be worth, like, say, tens of millions of dollars. But that's nothing compared. Jared Kushner took a $2 billion investment from a Saudi fund to his private equity firm. $2 billion. So once again, Donald Trump, no matter how bad you may be, it does not compare with Donald Trump.
This conversation raises all kinds of questions about accountability, and I want to sort of kind of move in that direction. And this is not the first time, it won't surprise you, that I've had a conversation about money in our politics. Your book is the latest, and it's the one that everybody's talking about. In case you've just tuned in, his name is Matt Lewis, and the book is called Filthy Rich Politicians, the Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. The part that troubles me about this, Matt, is that we're headed toward a couple of things here. We're headed toward an election season where I suspect more money is going to be spent in this presidential race than ever. And I think that happens every cycle. We always say there's more money being spent this time around than last time. But I'm bracing myself for the kind of money that's going to be spent in this race if we have a rematch of Biden-Trump. What say you?
Definitely. I think it's always, it's always going to be bigger than the last time. And I think we probably are going to have a rematch. I mean, if I had to bet today, I would bet that it's going to be a rematch. And, part of the issue is not just the money that's being spent, but the money that is being spent that no one really, knows who's spending it,
or where it's coming from. Exactly.
Yeah.
that part. Yeah.
I mean, this is an area where I'm actually a kind of a center right person, and so I actually believe that McCain-Feingold, which I think was a noble attempt to help solve this problem, actually, probably made it worse with all of these super PACs and the dark money now. The problem with the campaign finance reform, it tends to be the unintended consequences. You try to bring more transparency, and like money finds a way.
And the real tragedy here is, unless you know something I don't know, is that the folk who are responsible for fixing this are the folk who are benefiting from the system as it is.
Yeah. And I mean, part of the problem in general is that members of Congress set their own rules too. And so in my book, I try hard to talk about who the richest politicians are and how they made their money. And I compare them to the average American, how much they make. And, I think I do as good a job as anyone possibly could based on the information that's made public. But members of Congress write the rules. They just like the Supreme Court decides their ethics policy or not.
Yeah.
Members of Congress have made it impossible to know actually how rich they are.
Yep. And to your point, that would be or not. Or not is the operative phrase in that sentence. When we come forward with Matt Lewis, we'll talk about who some of those richest politicians are in Washington. You might be surprised by some names on the list, maybe not. More with Matt Lewis when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
What does access mean?
Access means owning a home. Access means growing my business.
Access means building generational wealth. No matter your goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Programs and initiatives provide the tools and resources to help you reach them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, life doesn't stop when cancer starts. After diagnosis, treatment is vital. But for some, just getting there, to appointments, chemo, or radiation, is a major challenge. You can change that. Volunteer to give rides with the American Cancer Society Road to Recovery program. Driving for a few hours of your day can make a life-saving difference for someone with cancer. Visit cancer.org/drive to learn more.
Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried new Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
Girl, I have a secret. When I get stressed out, I get sweaty. That's why I use Secret Clinical Antiperspirant. It's like my own secret weapon. For 72 hours, I get Secret's strongest protection against sweat caused by stress, heat, and activity, because you know how crazy life can get. Plus, it's made with advanced odor fighters that don't just cover up smelliness. They help prevent it from happening in the first place. Believe me, if I weren't wearing Secret, I'd be a hot, smelly mess. Thankfully, Secret works.
This is a special alert to all Americans who own a vehicle with less than 200,000 miles, with an auto warranty about to expire, or with no warranty coverage at all. Due to a decline in the economy, CarShield is announcing a low-cost, month-to-month vehicle protection plan that is now available to the public to save any driver out-of-pocket expenses on future auto repairs. Call now to find out how you can pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. Yes, you heard that correctly. Pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. An open phone line has been established for all drivers to call for a free quick quote. Call 800-381-8528 now. Drivers who are covered will not have to pay for covered repairs again. This protection plan is at an all-time low. Additionally, drivers who activate this vehicle protection today will also receive free roadside assistance, free towing, and car rental options at no additional cost. Call us for your free quick quote today. 800-381-8528. That's 800-381-8528. What do you have to lose? Call 800-381-8528. Again, 800-381-8528.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
In his new book, Matt Lewis argues that that the rich get elected and the elected get richer, in fact. So, Matt, you teased me with this, so I want to follow up on it. So who are some of the richest folk in Washington, although we seem not to care?
Yeah, so I'll give you a few of the interesting stories.
Okay.
The richest, as I mentioned earlier, is J.B. Pritzker. He's an heir of the Hyatt fortune. There are 11 billionaires in his family, and he's the governor of Illinois. The richest member of Congress is, again, we don't know for sure because they don't tell us exactly how rich they are, but it's probably Florida Senator and former Governor Rick Scott, who made a fortune in these privately owned hospitals, essentially. And there was some sketchiness involved in, allegations of, I think they even had a settled a Medicare fraud dispute at some point. But he is filthy rich as well. Another really rich politician is Darrell Issa, who he's a really interesting story. This is a guy who was arrested, I think, twice for allegedly stealing cars. He was never convicted, but arrested, indicted at least once. And he ended up starting a car alarm company. And, when someone tries to break into your car and you hear the sound of please step away from this car, like that was like literally his voice. There's also, Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, who's the granddaughter of the founder of Qualcomm in California. An interesting guy named Kevin Hearn. This one's a little different. He started off as a guy who owned a McDonald's. Well, he started off working at McDonald's, saved up enough money to buy a McDonald's, and today he's one of the richest politicians in America. So, the stories range from, Nepo babies to self-made, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah. Fair to say that once they get to Washington or get to these lofty positions, they don't lose money. Your book points out quite nicely that it just so happens, I don't know how this works, but it just so happens that the longer they're in office, the richer they get.
Yeah, and to your point about not losing money, I mean, one of the examples of alleged insider trading is a Republican, former Senator Richard Burr, who he was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee in the U.S. Senate. And right before COVID hit, COVID was here, but your average American didn't realize how bad COVID was. He dumped like $1 million worth of stock in things like Wyndham Hotels. Then he picks up the phone and calls his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law calls his broker and dumps his stock. So it's not that they make money necessarily; it's that they don't lose money. That's one of the big advantages to at least the perception of having, inside knowledge.
In our final moments with Matt Lewis, we'll talk about whether or not there are ways to reform the system. Are there ways to rebuild trust in these institutions and preserve American democracy? That's the goal. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
MC Light, or AARP, hip-hop, the cultural phenomenon that took New York by storm in 1973, is celebrating 50 years of rocking mics and crowds. Whether you're a ride-or-die hip-hop head or simply curious about its origins, check out the latest issue of AARP the magazine. It celebrates this incredible milestone with a featured story brimming with fun hip-hop facts and history. Head over to aarp.org/black community to learn more.
Community is more than where you live. It's the people in it who go above and beyond to help it thrive. During the 50th anniversary of hip-hop and the 75th anniversary of Black radio, AARP recognizes the members, volunteers, people, and partners giving back to our communities. We believe when our efforts drive change for the greater good, we all thrive together. To learn more about how AARP supports efforts to keep our communities thriving, visit aarp.org/black community.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Dominique DePrima here. Having a good credit score is one critical step to obtain a loan to buy a home. But did you know that your credit score is just one factor in getting a mortgage loan? Think about this. Lenders also consider your income, your employment history, current monthly debts, the size of the loan, and the amount of your down payment. Whatever your financial goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Initiatives support you in reaching them. Access your personal financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
What's up, LA? The Reparationist community got something real special going down in historic Lamert Park. August 12th, 2023. This event is sponsored by Reparations United and Black Pact, fighting for justice and empowering our community. Together, we can make moves. We have an insane lineup for y'all. The sultry Rotimi, the king of LA, The Game, smooth Eric Benet, and none other than the powerful sounds of blackness. Also, we have some special guests in the house. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, State Senator Stephen Bradford, LA's beloved Councilwoman Heather Hutt, and many more. They're bringing their passion and leadership to the stage. Mark your calendars, August 12th, 2023, Lamert Park. Let's come together, support each other, and make a difference. Peace, love, and reparations benefit concert and unity rally. Be there or be left out. Produced by Tara Perry of Black Pact and Cam Howard of Reparations United.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Speaking of rich, it might be rich dialogue. We're talking about rich politicians. The book is called Filthy Rich Politicians, The Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. The author of that book is Matt Lewis, who has been our guest in this hour. We got a few minutes left between now and the top of the hour. Matt, I guess the question is whether or not there are steps, there are ways to reform this system, whether or not there are ways to rebuild trust in our institutions, as I said earlier, preserve our democracy, or whether or not the damage that's done is already irreparable and fellow citizens have moved from being skeptical to being cynical and not much can be done.
Well, look, I think we are in trouble. I think times are difficult right now in terms of faith and trust in liberal democracy. And I also don't think we can ever really solve things in the sense that it's like you can never solve murder, you know. It's illegal, and but what we can do is have reforms that will mitigate the problem and incentivize good behavior. And I do think we can do that. The first is obviously to ban stock trading for members of Congress. And the good news is that there is something like, I think I said it was like 88% of Americans, Republicans and Democrats, want to do this. The day after my book came out, Senators Josh Hawley and Kirsten Gillibrand, a Republican and a Democrat, announced that they were sponsoring a bill that would do just that. So, I've been loosey with the football before, so I'm not overly optimistic, but there is an effort to do that. I would also do things such as a 10-year moratorium on lobbying. So after you serve in Congress, you can't just waltz into the world of lobbying and keep cashing in. You'd have to wait 10 years. I would ban the ability to pay family members for working for Congress or on the campaign. Personally, I used to be opposed to term limits. I'm now for them. I understand some Californians may disagree. One of the things I would do that's counterintuitive, I would actually pay Congress more. Right now, the average member makes about $174,000. That's a lot more than your average American, but still, because I'm going to be taking away their ability to bet on the stock market and make money from lavish book deals and whatnot, I think that they could be paid more, and that way they would focus actually on their job instead of focused on cashing in elsewhere.
It seems to me it's a good list, first of all. It seems to me, though, if you ban stock trading, you're going to stop all those millionaires and billionaires running for office. if they're told that you can kill two birds with one stone, ban stock trading, and you'll stop all these rich people from running for office in the first place. I digress on that point. The book is called Filthy Rich Politicians, The Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. The Washington Post calls the author of that book, Matt Lewis, a first-rate talent. He is super smart, as he said earlier in this conversation. He's center-right in his politics, and yet I can respect the fact that he's independent and he's intellectually honest when it comes to calling out both sides with regard to this cesspool that is our politics. Again, the book is called Filthy Rich Politicians, The Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. Matt Lewis, thanks for the conversation. Thanks for the download. I appreciate you, sir. All the best to you on the tour.
Thank you for having me.
My great delight to have you. Hour 3 of Tavis Smiley, when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
We thank you for sharing a part of your Monday with us here on the Black Information Network. I'm Mike Moore. Now, here's the latest. The property manager of